Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the kind introduction. Yes, I am traveling from Istanbul, and it has been a long trip, but it's fantastic to be here, and I was very lucky to not see the rain for the couple of days that I was here. I work in Garanti, which is one of the subsidiaries of BBVA, I think the second or the third largest bank in the world. And I manage the UX team that has an input into almost everything in the bank that has an end user in it. We do enterprise software. We do some assistance with the front end channels. The last week, for example, the week that before I came here, we changed the font on the ATM slips to be in line with the brand. So that's the level of detail that we can go into the bank. Before that, I was working in a company called Çiçek Sepeti. It's like 1-800 Flowers, third largest flower and gifting site in the world. And before that, I was with Monetize, which is a financial service institution based in London, where we had a chance to work with big banks, insurance companies, including Royal Bank of Scotland and Visa. So I have an HCI background, and like most of you, I really appreciate the value of design because big problems can be solved when you go and do proper user research. And in this conference, we were very lucky to hear fantastic talks about the value of research. On the first day, we heard Christina talk about the value of including the user in the design cycle when you're introducing change. Indy gave a fantastic keynote on the first day about how you should balance user needs with scientific research and the way that you approach users and their unique needs. Anushka had a great workshop about checking with users. Every now and then, Jacob Nielsen talked about it, and I prepared a slide especially for him. Sukada talked about collaborative analysis. So we all want to have research. We all think about it. But unfortunately, when you mention research to your clients, this is what you get. They come up with many, many arguments against research. And you're trying to work for them to do something good for them, right? So they see that as this expensive one-time thing where they really don't need it. Because anything that gets their time away from creating screens is a waste. So they want to just skip to creating screens because they want to play the design game where they say, well, yeah, the border is a little too thick on this. I don't really like how it feels, without really worrying about the problems that they're solving through this research activity. Today, I'm going to talk about this case. I have been in the consulting cycles. I have been working with big companies and small companies. And believe me, there were a lot of times where they said, yeah, just skip that. You just really want to see the screens. What do you do when you hit this wall? And what are the things that you can do would be the topic of today. Well, obviously, like adults, the first thing that you can do is to discuss their arguments. These are the most common ones that we have heard. I'm sure you have heard a lot in your world as well. They say, we already know what our users want because we know how marketing department has reached out to them and we have a social media channel. We track what they want. That is very different. User research is a very particular type of inquiry that requires a particular diligence into how you're working with your users. It is not about just asking, so what do you want or what do you like? It has a particular sequence to it. You first define the set of problems that you're interested in. Then you formulate the questions that will allow you to answer those. And then you pick the methods, the right methods within the right parameters that allow you to investigate into those areas. You do that inquiry, which gives you a lot of data that is in many shape or forms. You spend time analyzing it, and then you get some nuggets, some analytical pieces that you share with the rest of the team. That is the cycle that gives you the insight in the user research, which is not present in other types of research done in the corporate environments. The other thing that you hear is we don't have time or we don't have the budget. Well, yeah, if your first foray into user research is a 6-month ethnography project in Tokyo, in Brazil, and in New York, yes, you won't have the budget all the time. There are hundreds and millions of different types of user research methods with wonderful parameters that you can adjust to fit your budget and your time constraints. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to take long. The other thing that we hear all the time is this is not the right time for research. Or you want to delay it until you have something at hand. Well, by the time that you get to the point where you have something in your hand, it may be too late because there are different types of research that you can use before the project starts, during the project, and after the project goes live. Generative research, for example, gives you a lot of ideas that you can use at the beginning. Evaluative research may be used towards the end, where you say, well, did we get this right or not? So at the planning cycle, you can use research methods to understand what the deep user need is. You can understand deeper drivers that feed into that need. During the execution phase, you can see if your solution, if your proposed solution is actually meeting that need, and if not, if it is going away from it, or if it's getting closer to it. And when your product is live, when you made your release, you can use the research techniques to find out if there are things that you have completely missed during your cycle. And if your product is successful, we all wish that, we all hope that, has it created new needs? Did it change the way that people used to work when you started the project? And if so, this is a way to capture those and move it back to your product cycle. So there is the right time to engage research in a project is now. I mean, it will create valuable insight at every cycle. That's the other one. We're just starting, there's nothing to test yet. Well, believe me, your competition was not taking a vacation while you were not doing something. So even if you don't have anything, you can just recruit the right type of users, the right type of personas, and do a simple user research to understand what your competitors do that are better than your projected plans. That may invalidate your ideas on day one, which will save you months and years of development time and productization time. This is another favorite. We don't really need research. We have analytics. Analytics is great, or any version of it. It gives you a lot of data, but it only gives you the end state. It shows you what happened. It doesn't give you why it happened, the way that it happened. And also, it is almost all of the work that is done on analytical data is based on correlation, which doesn't really mean causation. I think we saw fantastic graphs today and yesterday about the correlation between use of margarine and divorce rates. They just happen to correlate. There is no causation between margarine and divorce rates. So I think when you present these arguments, you will get a reaction. Almost all of your clients will give you airtime and say, "You'll listen to you carefully. We'll try to understand what you do." And maybe 1% of them will say, "Yeah, I really did not know enough about research, so I'm sorry. Maybe we should just start with some user research." The others will just say, "I want my screens." And the burden is on us to convince these people that starting with a solution may not be the best idea. And to be able to do this, we need to convince and show them that the research methods that they're afraid of isn't really the research methods that they should be scared of. We need to find something that is super quick, ideally to be done in a week. We need something that is affordable so that they will not need to make huge adjustments to their budgets. We need something that is correct so that when we execute it, we get valuable data as opposed to just like fun and slideware that someone can feel good about. And then we need something that can be done together. This is important because over the wall, if you have something that you just throw over the wall to someone that has no idea about this, it is very easy to disregard the findings. Today, I will talk about 3 methods that satisfy these requirements. First one is benchmarking. Basically looking at taking a fact-based snapshot of what users has been doing with your product. The second one is field immersion, an insanely intense way of getting to the users and trying to understand what they do. And then looking at usage data, including analytics, looking at what they have been doing with your research and following the footprints that they have left as they were using their product. The goal of these methods are not to replace the necessary research cycles. These, as I mentioned, are little things that we can include as our first foray into the research to show that there's value in doing this, and you don't have to spend you don't have to spend months and millions of dollars to get to an insight. So let's start with the first one, benchmarking. This is basically looking at your offering and creating a snapshot of how it has been used and how it stacks against your competitors. The process is actually fairly easy. You need to identify the high-level categories that your client is is interested in. By the way, I'm saying client, but this can also be a department that you're working with, a partner that you have. Client seems to be the word that I've been using, but I mean all of those people that are in the mix. Once you identify the high-level categories, in here we have 6, you need to identify the subcategories that go into these. Some of these subcategories will be numbers. For example, the monthly profit, that will be a number. There will be others that will be binary yes or no's. For example, you may look into your competition to see if they have responsive websites. For example, that will be a binary yes or no. Others will fall into a continuum, which you need to grade. And for all of those things that you grade, you need to make a criteria chart so that when you grade them, you will actually do them in a just and fair way. For example, here we have colors under visual design. To be able to judge this properly, you just divide it into 3 grades. Here we have 3. 5 would be a challenge. You can use 4. And then we describe what an exemplary use of color for this type of usage is, what a lagging use of color is, and then what will be on par, what will be acceptable. Once you do this for everything that you're going to rank, you then divide it up with the team members that you're working with. These are maybe mostly usually analysts or project managers that kind of want to get into this area and already have the field information that they can bring into this. So what you do is you use that grading scheme and you list your categories in a shared spreadsheet if possible. And everyone ranks each line, each criteria for all the competitors. This is important for the methodological correctness because if I go and rank the first competitor and if someone else does the second competitor, there may not be a good correlation between the 2 columns that we did. That is why everyone who is involved in this activity will get subsections or a few categories from the list and do that ranking for all of the competitors in that area. So here's an example about what this looks like. This was a zoomed out shot of a study that we did in an e-commerce context. We had 140 categories. As you see, relatively half of them were data. It was about finances, it was about their brand values, it was about their competition, and the rest was, are we good, are we bad, where are we lagging, where are we leading? Obviously, this is huge. So in terms of resources, 4 people worked on this, 2 of them full-time, and it took them about a week or so to complete. Obviously, this is so hard to look at, so we summarize these into averages and totals so that it is easy to see where things are going well, where things are lagging behind. This is an insanely powerful tool to use with a team because it shows the strengths and weaknesses of a product as reported by the team that created those strengths and weaknesses. So it is a mirror that is based on completely reliable data from that domain that shows where things are bad, where things are good. This is not very hard to do for a medium-sized project. Basically, on day 1, you can identify the stakeholders that will contribute into this activity, and then you can establish the criteria. On day 2, you can do your ranking, and on day 3, if you have time and if you have the resources, you can do the cross-checking to make sure that you have reliable data. If you have existing data, that's great. Finance people, call center, field support, strategy departments have this type of data that you can easily get access to help you fill this in a very quick way. The second technique is field immersion. This is basically taking someone out of their comfy environment and putting them on the field where the users are to get them to understand what is really going on in the field. I'll give you an example from my previous company, Çiçek Sepeti. Basically, Çiçek Sepeti loves doing everything in-house. So they do everything from the lorry management system down to the florist dashboards that are used by the florists in the network. But one of those dashboards was very central to the way that the orders were delivered. And when you are racing against time, when you're racing against quality, it is very important to be in contact with the florists in real time and help them do their job so that they can be on time. However, we were getting a lot of complaints. There were many historical reasons for that, but the biggest thing was how the requests for developing the features for the dashboard arrived at the development department. The business lead would come up with an idea, they would formulate it to a point, then they would talk to the product owner, then the product owner would take that idea to the business analyst. The business analyst would then talk to the tech lead, and then the tech lead will talk to the developer. This is such a widespread, I mean, it wasn't a small company, but it is such a game of telephone that it just hurts. So what we did is we took that team and we went out to make flowers. This was more fun than I thought. The day normally, so the office, our headquarters was in Levent, which is the business district. This day did not start in the business district. It started at the flower market. This is where we got in the line to get the bunches of flowers. And these aren't the flowers that you get in an arrangement. These are straight from the nursery that are not trimmed. They have a lot of hubris on them. They're dirty. So they need to be prepared for those arrangements. So we went back to our office. This was this is one of the florists that we closely work with, and started pre-process them together for the arrangements. Then, this is the master florist that oversaw our activities that day. In the morning, this is like around 7 o'clock, the orders started, trickling in. And we had no help. This guy was just not helping us. So we had to try, figure out what flowers do I need to use, in which order, when do I need to deliver this. He was just looking over our head and just like saying, what the hell are you guys doing? So without that help, it was really immersive for us to figure out, oh my God, I can't even look at that screen because I don't know what flowers I have in store or whether this is the right flower to use. There was more. I mean, we did the arrangements. I mean, that was the one that I tried to do. I had to add the little gifts to that, and I had to do the QA process where I take a picture, uploaded it, make sure that it looks correct, do the paperwork, and then we need to be out for delivery. But this is delivery in Istanbul. 12 million people lives in this really crowded space, and there is nothing called Google Maps, Yandex to an extent, but the addresses are, it is not very easy to pinpoint them on a map. So you need to ask someone who knows the area to know where they are. And no pressure, I mean, Çiçek Sepet had a 90-minute delivery guarantee, so we were just like, yeah, we'll just go into the traffic and drive. So this was very different than the Levent environments. Fantastic offices, open spaces, beautiful, craft, versus that, insanely real environment where you need to work on the app. Luckily, the team really got a lot from that immersion activity. They were running on an agile cycle. They were running on Scrum, I think, back at that time. First sprint was really good improvements, and within a month, they did a lot of improvements that improved the life of the florist. How much did we spend for this activity? Nothing. We spent half a day outside of the office, but I must say that I have wasted a lot of flowers that day, so that was an impact. We do this a lot with the bank as well. When we are inside the bank, everything is superbly orchestrated because, I mean, banks are serious institutions. There is zero margin for error, and we work like that. Type A achievers, all the fantastic technological equipment, under our fingertips. We work efficiently. Everything is planned and orchestrated. That is not the case when you go to a small branch out of nowhere. The customers that visit that branch are not in the same environment as we are. Our fellow employees that work in the branch are not in the same environment as we are, and that creates a huge difference. So doing this in a bank is really eye-opening. How do we do this with people who are not researchers? We basically pair with them where possible. And then we remind them that this is not a survey where you ask people whether you like it or not. This is about answering particular research questions. And we invite them to think with a beginner's mind, that they are actually not the PM for this product that know every single screen. They're just coming up with a fresh look. We tell them to ask the questions and then shut up and to listen. When they see a problem, we ask them not to help because that is the point of the whole exercise. Some of them are really excited about collecting something from the field, so they come in and take a lot of notes. We say that is not necessary, that listening is the most important part, and then there could be other things that you can use to record this, asking a permission to take a photo, maybe a short video. And then we always suggest dressing a little more casual than you would normally dress, just to be able to establish that rapport and signify that day, on that very specific day, you are not the PM for this project. You are someone else coming in a different shape or form to listen and to learn from this particular user in a very different relationship. Biggest reminder is that this is not about attitudes, this is about behavior. You need to observe, you're there to observe that behavior and not ask about how that feels. So there are 3 questions that we remind everyone. The first one is, when was the last time you did X? Or can you show me how you do X? Or if you're inquiring about X and it just passes by and they haven't started doing X, you can ask them about, well, you told me about X, can you tell me more about that? Things that you need to watch out for as the pair are confirmation biases. When you work with people in such big enterprises, they tend to own the product that they have. So when they go in, they may have a tendency to hear what they want to hear. This comes out a lot in the analysis phase. There's also the personal agendas. I mean, no one wants to work on projects that fail. No one wants to work on projects that are bad. That is why they may go in and hear only the positive things and not necessarily pay attention to the negative things. You need to also watch out for the anchoring effect. Good interviewers, good researchers know that the first thing that they hear may not be the biggest part of the picture. But when you're anchored to the first thing that you hear, you may actually miss a lot of the good information that comes after the first part of the conversation. And we do that through coaching. One of the hardest parts to do this in an enterprise situation is the organizational dynamics. Banks, financial institutions, big enterprises are insanely hierarchical, which means that there's a manager, assistant manager, vice assistant manager, junior assistant manager, down like 7 levels down. And when someone from more of a headquartersly space comes down to a branch, they may forget that they are not a manager that day. They may forget that they are there to listen. They are actually not even on par. They are slightly below that person for that specific day because they need to learn. This is something that you need to be very careful about, and coaching and that close pairing exercise is a good one to address this need. So this is also very easy to set up. Identify your questions, identify the people that you're working with, go over the field guide together with them, answer their questions, plan the site visits, and let them know that you're coming. Assume that this is like going to a friend to be a guest. You don't, not with all your friends, you just don't show up. You say, hey, are you available the next day? So treat them that way. Site 2 would be day 2 would be the site visit in the morning, and then notes and reviews in the afternoon. And then the third day, you can do a simple affinity diagram exercise or just an open forum among people to identify issues that have arisen the day before. The third topic, the third method, is about looking at the data that was created by the users as they were using the product. This is actually the one case where your client really knows more about the users than you do. But you're coming in and presenting a different perspective on that same data by looking at it differently. The data that you have can come from analytics. It may be the logs. It may be any record, any input, any usage data that the users have left behind. But instead of looking at it from here's how things have unfolded, you look at that cumulative data with 3 lenses. One, you use it to prioritize things differently. For example, if you see what the users that the most usage is around a particular area, you know that area is important, and you may focus your future research efforts on that area. You can identify quick wins. Things like bounce rates, visitor funnel analysis can point you to areas that are clearly red flags. You don't really have to do further research to understand why things are happening. You know that you need to do something on those areas. So that's a big call and big pull immediately. And most importantly, it allows you to hypothesize. When you see the data, your questions will change. You know that there are other things that are in play. You will know that there are other things that you might have missed on your first pass. So seeing that data and having control over that a little bit will allow you to ask new questions. How you do that is, I'll just listed some high-level pieces here. Mike Beasley had a fantastic workshop on day 1. If he's still around, please do check in with him. I think he has a book on this as well, where you use Google Analytics or Omniture or equivalent tools to look into the user data to understand what's going on. You can look at entry paths and exit paths where people are coming and going out. Bounce rates, are they staying on a page or are they having problems? Top referrers, where are they coming from? research keywords. What is the thing that brought them to this site? Time on the page and session lengths are important things. You can also look at the visitor flow, where when the users come to the site or an app, what is the path that they take through their taps and clicks. My favorite out of this is device distribution, because every time that you present in the exec room, everyone has the most expensive Macs, best displays, fastest internet connection, iPhone 6s Pluses. When you look at the data and you show that the most frequent use comes from a cheap Android phone that has a 3-inch screen that doesn't work with touch, that changes a lot of the discussion. So I love presenting that at the executive level. The other thing that you can look at is user content. As I said, there are a lot of things that you input to the app or the website as you're using them. Addresses, amounts, recipients. You can look into some of that data in an anonymized version, in an anonymized way, to make sense of it. Call center is another place that you can go to. Complaints are really nice areas that you can look at, because someone had a pain and they were bothered enough to file a complaint. Every now and then you get these superbly angry, charged people calling in and just complaining with no end for 10, 15 minutes. And they are the best places to look at. Just listening to that call attentively and without prejudice will allow you to identify some of the pain points at a deep level about what is wrong with your service and what may be wrong with your product. And you can always go to the app stores or general complaint sites to gauge the general reaction. Again, none of these are conclusive. They won't tell you why people are doing this, but it actually shows you the paths where you can start for better insights. So we went over 3 different types of methods, and this one is actually the easiest one, I'd say. On the first day, you basically identify what numbers you may be looking at and pair with the team that will supply that data, and spend 1 or 2 days sitting down with them to see whether there are other questions that you can look at. So out of these 3 methods, you may have chosen to do any of them in any order. You may have chosen 1 or 2. So from a research perspective, you're fine. But your audience is still waiting, and they want screens. They don't like this stuff. They don't want this stuff. The only way that you're going to address this issue is to create those screens. This, I think, is the most controversial thing that I am going to say today. You did not have research. Your client did not have research. And the step in this process is to create screens. Mind you, these are not visual designs. These are slideware. What this step is about creating screens that show some of the findings that you have found through that short research period. This is not even about revising the existing things. You can ignore a lot of the platform constraints, some of the accessibility issues. This is about exaggerating some of the findings, some of the things that you have seen through the usability study. For example, have you run into a situation where you know that it was hard to find the submit button? Just make it bigger. Is it a legibility issue? I'm sure it was a content issue, but no, make the text bigger just to start that conversation. High fidelity in this round is okay. Actually, if you're presenting to the executives, I would urge you to start high fidelity, and I'll tell you why in a second. So once you have your research data, once you have your screens, it's time to share and discuss with the team. This is very important because this is the time when your work is going to pay off. Start with the problems and the questions that you set out to answer. Briefly tell them what happened. Did you look at the data? And if you did, what was the data that you looked at? If you did a field excursion, briefly tell them who you work with and which branches or which locations you looked at, and then basically pull them in. Then share 5 to 10 findings or insights that you've gathered from this data. It is very important that you do this with the team that work with you. They need to be in that presentation room with you. They need to talk. They need to be a part of this. So then the fun starts. It is time to show them the screens. But it is not to get an approval or to have them say, yeah, I like this or not. It is a bait that they are going to get from you to start that research conversation. I'll show you a couple of slides that are just sample slides about how you can do them. For example, let's assume that we found out something about the loan pages not inviting the users to explore. There's actually text under those if you look at that screen, basically describing how you reach that conclusion. The following slide would be some of the suggestions that you get from that particular insight. Again, not conclusive, just the first things that you have seen. And on the right, a screen, oh my God, that shows those, that illustrates those changes. The next step would be to share a prototype with the team and show that over a prototype. And here's the other opportunity that you have. When the clients see the suggestions on a screen or on a cell phone, they start thinking about that. But this is not what you want to show them, because this looks like an end state. This should never be the first page of your prototype. When they click that link, this is what they should see. After that, this should be the second screen that they see. And only after a few more clicks, looking into the data and your process, then they could see what you have suggested. This is a fantastic way to open up that research process, to show them that it wasn't expensive to begin with. It is doable with the screens within the same week of that research, and then start talking about the issues that they see over on that screen. Here's why I think high fidelity works really well here. Assume that an executive says, oh yeah, blue, like, oh my God, we're blue, but we hate that blue. This is your cue to go and say, so what makes you hate that blue? Oh, it's outdated. Against what? Oh, iOS is no longer blue. Oh, but only 70% of only 20% of your users are on iOS, and revenue-wise, they're like 10% based on the data that we looked at. Do you really want to change that? Oh yeah, we want to change that. Okay, shall we do another user study with 10 users this time to understand how they react? See, that is those are little things that you can start the conversation with. I don't like the button there. I mean, it's like a two-step thing. Oh, why do you think it should be two steps? Well, there are a lot of people who abandon our credit process. Oh, tell me why. More about that. Oh, we don't know. Do you want us to figure out? We can get 5 users, to run them through the same thing. And we can also figure out where, if they're not using Piezo Bank, they may be using, the Chick Bank to get that. We can do a competitive analysis. Well, why not? So those are the little things that will allow you to start that conversation. Unfortunately, they're not going to say yes to everything. But again, it's a good point to start that conversation. And finally, be transparent about your process, and don't be afraid to recommend new phases of research at every step. I'd like to share a fantastic story about how we came out to do a really innovative stuff in one of the banks that I work with. So this bank is one of the largest banks, most established banks in Turkey with millions of customers. They wanted to change some things for their first user experience and onboarding. We worked a few areas, and they obviously said, no, we're in a rush, we can't really test. So we cheated, and we took the initiative to kind of roll off 5 other users that we know were using this bank from another study, and just ran the screens by them. During our presentation, the executive VP who was sponsoring this said, well, I kind of am split between your design choices. Have you tested this? And we said, yeah, we did. We had 5 users that had a look at this. He was furious. Do you know how many millions of people are visiting this site? This is our premium property. How did you come with only 5 users? And we said, we were pressed with time, but from a theoretical perspective, testing with 25 users across the 6 personas that we have identified for you would be the right way to do that. But we didn't have time. Would you like us to do that? And he said the best thing, he asked the best question that you can hear in a client approval meeting. He said, when can I see this? So we went ahead, did the proper research, found out a lot of new things that impacted that onboarding process, came up with a much, much stronger presence there. And as for new audiences, the room may not be the only people that will see that research. If they think that other departments will need to see that, by all means, do another presentation. Share that prototype link with everyone, and believe me, it will go beyond your imagination within a bank or a big organization. That is why it's really crucial to include that research bits and the detailed process before the screens that you present with them. So today, we talked about user research and how it's a very regimented process. It's basically asking deliberate questions to get deliberate answers to things that you care about, and then going to the users to learn details about how they go about using your product to meet their needs, and then working with your friends, with your colleagues, with the designers, with the team to come up with potential design solutions to those problems. Unfortunately, not everyone is amenable to those, and there are doubts, there are arguments, there's sometimes fear, there's some reticence against using research. For those people, there can be ways to convince them otherwise by using quick, affordable, and effective ways to show that there's value in research and they shouldn't be afraid of it. Today, I covered 3 of them. We talked about benchmarking, we talked about field immersion, and we talked about usage data. If you noticed, only one of them actually uses and goes directly to the users. Every one of them is slightly different. Some of them is more analytical, some of them is more mathematical. But again, every single one of them has something from the user. It's either cumulative, it's either indirect, but in the end, it goes back to the users and asks them about how they do with your product. My teams have used these methods to break the ice with a lot of clients that did not want to do research. It was hard work, but I think it was worth it, because in the end, we got to learn very different stories from people. We got to create things that we were proud of, and we got to develop that really rich relationship between our clients and the new users that we are working with. I hope the tips that I shared with you today will be useful for you, and I appreciate the time that you gave for me today. Thank you very much. We will have lunch in about 5 minutes, but if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So, I think you said it once, but I just want to hear if I got this right. Your client says, the data we have shows us that we're doing well. We're making money. Whatever, we're achieving our goal. Why should we do anything else? What's your response?
So the question is, your client says, we're doing well, we're making money, why should we do this? To that, you can, if the only goal that they have is to make money at the expense of the user's comfort, then you just can't do a lot about that. They're basically churning users to make money, and if it's their business, unfortunately, that's an impenetrable wall. I highly doubt that there are many companies like that. The loyalty factor, the value of user experience in creating something that I would prefer to use as a user is just as valuable as an ongoing revenue. So what I would recommend would be taking a lead and say, I understand that you are doing well in this particular area. Can we look into other areas that will boost additional factors, not just revenue, but customer satisfaction, task rates, or anything that would particularly pertain into that area, and then start using that as a way to bigger research projects.
Finding that you're sharing that link with other departments, then you found that extra intro is very critical. And that's one of the things that we don't do. We don't hand out wireframes without somebody to be there. So you're finding that kind of eliminates that need?
Yeah. So the question is, we rarely hand off wireframes or any other design material without us being there. I think this is perfect practice, that you should not present design work without the designers and the creators trying describing the process behind it. Again, as I mentioned in the slides, these are not design. This is just slideware saying, hey, when you do research, you don't get a doc file. You don't get a PDF file. You actually get something that you can tap on. It's incomplete, but it's something that you can tap on. I would obviously prefer to do that presentation in place, but flip it and look at it from another side. You are basically infecting an organization that really did not respect research with just one link, and it just spreads its way around. Include contact information. Be ridiculously open about who worked on that. if you want, I mean, add trackers to the links that you included in the prototype to see who clicked on what, so that you have information about how to follow up with them and say, hey, that link that I shared with you guys, like 10 of you, it's getting traction. I'm getting like thousands of visitors. You know, is there another thing that we can do? So yes, it's valuable to present research when you're in the room, but this is a slightly different tool that you can just let go. Any other questions? Thank you very much.